Good afternoon, Manitoba. I'm Larry McIntosh. I'll be your host for the next hour. Thank you for tuning in. I want to welcome you to the Louis Riel Day special edition of Food and Friends. Normally our show airs on Saturday mornings from 8 to 9, but we had the honor of being asked to do a special show for this holiday Monday. So happy Louis Riel Day, Manitoba. However, we have some listeners from across Canada listening via CJOB.com, and they have a different name for this holiday Monday. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, today is Family Day. In PEI, it is Islander Day. And for the remaining provinces and territories, it's not a holiday today, so sorry about that. No matter what holiday your holiday is called, please make sure you spend some time with your friends and family. My guest this afternoon is Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter. Good afternoon, Ron.
Good afternoon, Larry.
So you have a show on CJOB noon on Sundays, right?
Yes, noon every noon. So Sunday's noon. Yes.
Sundays at noon. So you're used to being on the other side of the table, where
I
you're interviewing.
As I actually have been a little nervous walking into this one because I'm usually interviewing the people, not the one being asked the questions.
So it's a little different for you, right?
Indeed, it is.
So the show you've been doing, Journeys Travel Show, you've been doing that for how long?
Basically, been doing it about 14 years. Initially, it was supposed to start on the middle of September in 2001, and obviously doing a travel show at that time suddenly became not appealing to anybody, so we postponed it and made it near the end of October. So we do operate year-round as you do, and so we've been doing a lot of shows. I think we're in the area of 750 shows, if I work it correctly.
Wow.
That's a lot of
shows. So did you find material for 750 shows?
You know, it's interesting. The travel world is fascinating. It's ever-changing. There's always questions that people ask me that I use both in the column that I write in the Winnipeg Free Press, and that was in this last week's paper. If people checked, I talked about Valentine's Day and the history of Valentine's Day and the practice of Valentine's Day around the world. So there's always something you find fascinating. So I can take a subject like that and expand on it because people like to know what's happening at the various parts of the world. And likewise, there's always news. There's always breaking news that I try to bring people up to date on. If there's a protest somewhere, I try to tell them that flights may be delayed. And then I can always talk about destinations because I've been fortunate to have traveled to about 65 countries already, so I can cover a few topics in that regard.
And in the next hour, we're going to talk about a lot of those trips because I've met you in the store. I want to talk about that too. And some of the stories you're telling me are just fascinating in the places you've been around the world. But let's take a step back. So you've been doing the radio show 14 years. The article in the Winnipeg Free Press, which is great. You're always got to come up with new things to talk about, which is the creative side of you for sure. You also have a store. Well, obviously the store is the main business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the store was an offshoot of a bad time in the travel industry, quite frankly. Oh. I am the past national president of ACTA, the Association for Canadian Travel Agents. And I was a president when the commission cuts were taking place. And I would go to the gurus, they would do these big speeches, and they would say, well, you know, since the commission cuts have taken place, you have to go into the leisure business. Well, I already was a leisure agency. And I started thinking about the future, and my background is marketing. And so I came up with the concept. I actually did research, which came directly from, again, a marketing background that I had, did focus groups, and then set up the store. And I always find these things fascinating because we kind of got kicked out of our existing location for Renaissance Travel. We were there, and they said they weren't going to renew the lease because they wanted to use the entire space. I think had they not actually terminated our lease, there would never have been a Journeys.
Really?
So when they gave me that notice, I knew that it was now or never, and then proceeded to put in place what I think is a pretty interesting and fascinating retail location that doesn't exist anywhere else in the form that we've created it.
So what's the address for those who may not know about it?
Donald at Wardlaw, technically 102-326 Wardlaw, but you never find that. So it's a corner of Donald and Wardlaw. If you're coming from downtown, it's just a couple of blocks south of the Midtown Bridge. If you're coming from the south, you turn left on Scott, right on Wardlaw. It's a big place, and there's a domo in front, and we share it with Design Manitoba, the building. We share it with Design Manitoba.
And it's a neat store. I mean, Shelley and I are fortunate we get to travel on business and pleasure. So you go in there for, suitcases, or you go in there for a pack for something, right? all different sorts. But it's also an interesting place to shop. I mean, as you well know, you have Tilly's products there.
That's right.
And I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah, Tilly is one of the products we have the exclusive on in clothing. You can get hats elsewhere, but we have the exclusive on clothing. We have not exclusives, but we are the main store for a number of other products like Ex Officio, people love, a woman's line called Simply. So while we're not exclusive on those, we've been pretty heavy in them. And then women's bags, lug, Oprah recommended lug. Now, the interesting thing about lug, you can buy it just about everywhere, but no one has more colors and depth than we do. And the other thing about what I think we've tried to create, I frequently speak about what we do with the staff, and I talk about the trust quotient. And for us, being able to answer people's questions about travel, being able to give them some advice, whether it be from the travel agency perspective, but from the store perspective, because the reality is that the experience is what you want. We say your journey starts here, and so everything I'm saying is you don't have to worry about selling anybody. Not many stores can say they have about a 90 to 95% conversion rate. That's huge. Yes. 95% of the people who walk in, 90% of the people come in to buy something. So I'm constantly saying to the staff, you don't have to worry about selling anything. Make sure that the buying experience is positive, and make sure you help them with everything that they're looking for, and be as honest as you can in trying to satisfy what you perceive their needs are going to be if they're traveling to certain specific destinations. It may be security in some, it may be comfort in others.
We'll be right back with Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Center after we take this break for your weather update. Welcome back to the Louis Riel Day edition of Food and Friends. Stumbled over that. I'm Larry McIntosh. Our show normally airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9, and we hope you'll join us then. Food and Friends Radio is also on TV. Each radio show is filmed and will be posted on MyToba.ca tomorrow. So if you want to see the TV version of this or previous radio shows, please visit MyToba.ca. Thanks to 680 Studio B's Nicole, who produces our show, and Riley, who operates the camera, as well as the teachers of the Broadcasting and Media Arts program at TechVoc High School. You can also listen to an audio podcast of Food and Friends at SoundCloud.com and at the iTunes Store. So please just do a search for Food and Friends with Larry at MyToba.ca or SoundCloud.com or at the iTunes Store, and all the shows will come up for your listening or viewing pleasure. And it's very important for me to mention that Food and Friends is only available because of 680 CJOB and its advertisers. So please tune in right here every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock or listen live at cjob.com. We're back with Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Center. So we talked a little bit about the store, but let's talk about you. Are you from Manitoba originally?
Yeah, I was born in a small town in western Manitoba. At that time, the population was about 400. It's about 100 now. We looked forward to mail night. Mail night was when the train came in, because that was the way the communication took place. It didn't have running water when I was there because it was a small town. It was likely one of the last in the province to get running water. So I was raised in a very different environment than the people that I knew from the different, even nearby towns. So it was a very interesting upbringing. And I always say that I didn't know I was poor until later on. I realized that we didn't have anything, but we didn't seem to miss anything. So it was a great upbringing in a small town full of great people that I still have contact with, and I really appreciate the fact that I grew up in that environment.
So what was your first job?
Well, my very first job, I was pitching bales at a farmer nearby. So the bales would come out of, there was a baler. They were the rectangle bales at that time, not the big round bales. And I was in what was called a stone boat, which is basically a pulled cart of sorts, not on wheels but on sleds.
Okay.
And then as the bales came off, I piled them, and then with the crowbar, you just hammered the crowbar into the hole in the middle and held on like crazy till it went through. And the most interesting experience, I know how farm accidents happen because the first time I did that, I didn't realize the power. and the crowbar just came and missed me by a fraction of an inch, and that was my first experience. But what it did do, I was 12 years old, and I became a real strong boy at that time.
I imagine that's hard work.
Really hard work.
So when you got into full-time business, did you get right into, you were talking earlier about marketing, is that what you went into? Or?
Yes, I did a few things early, but I ended up going to Ryerson and took the radio and television arts course in Toronto. I'd actually moved to St. Catharines, lived with relatives for a period of time, and worked at Canada Trust as a teller for a short period, and then I had always had an interest in broadcast. And so when I heard about Ryerson, I applied. I was able to get in. And at that time, interestingly, because it was full circle, my goal was to be a broadcaster. After I graduated from Ryerson, I changed my ideas, and I liked directing talent as opposed to being the talent.
Okay.
So I spent many years as radio television director with advertising agencies in Winnipeg, and then perchance I was hired to manage an agency in Saskatchewan, and then came back to Winnipeg and set up my own agency. So everything before travel and before Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter was not at all in that area. But to tie the knot, I have always looked upon Journeys as a brand identification program that we created, and all of that comes from the marketing background.
So, and you've done not a full circle, but you started off in broadcasting, and you're now doing broadcasting as well as some marketing, obviously, and the travel agency and the store, and I think you even have a health clinic there, don't you, for a travel health clinic?
Yes, we have a travel health clinic, and that was what came out when I did the research that I talked about. I did focus groups before I set up Journeys, and I remember many of the questions about what would you want. I remember one question I said, well, where would what about tanning lotion? And I said, would you want tanning lotion? And they said, yes. And I said, well, couldn't you buy it at the resort when you get there? And I always remember the answer of the people was, when I get to the resort, I want the beach, not the store. So we used that, and the travel clinic almost came about by accident. I was listening, and nobody actually suggested a travel clinic. And interestingly, I'd heard about travel clinics elsewhere, and the only place that existed at that time was WRHA, which is pretty much the same thing again. It's the only other place. Our doctor, in fact, is at Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, our presiding physician. But to me, I wanted everything to do with travel. So it was tying the loop. It was also the most difficult division to set up because all of the rules around medical are very different. The insurance and the nurses, what they must do, what they can't do. Someone calls up, one of the challenges we constantly face, someone calls up and says, what kind of vaccination do I need if I'm going to? And our receptionist is clearly told by our presiding physician, you will never say what it is, because their past history makes a difference, their current medications make a difference. So we can never say what they need, and we get people who sometimes get a little angry, but we can't, because we could be giving advice that could prove libelous, if not dangerous.
We'll be right back with Ron Pradinuk, Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter, after we take this break. I'm Larry McIntosh. Welcome back to Food and Friends Louis Riel Day Edition. Our show normally airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9, and we'll hope you join us then. It's time for a recipe segment called Now We're Cooking. You don't need to write this recipe down, as it is today's Recipe of the Day at peakmarket.com, and today we're going to be posting the recipe to our Facebook, Google+, and LinkedIn sites during the news break, as well as tweeting it out. So today's recipe is Parmesan herb fillets. Parmesan herb fillets. Here's what you need for the recipe. 1 pound of fish fillets, patted dry. 1/4 cup of light mayonnaise. 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese grated. 2 tablespoons of green onions chopped. 1 tablespoon of red bell pepper chopped. Cajun pepper to taste. 1/2 cup of dry breadcrumbs, and 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil and pepper to taste. Place the fish fillets in a single layer in the bottom of a baking dish and set aside. In a small bowl, stir together the mayonnaise, cheese, onions, pepper, and Cajun pepper. Then spread the mixture evenly over the fish. In a separate bowl, combine the breadcrumbs, basil, and pepper, and sprinkle the mixture over the top of the fish. Bake at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes or until the fish is opaque and flakes easily with a fork. And this recipe serves 4. Again, this is today's recipe of the day at peakmarket.com, and it'll be up on all our social media sites in a few minutes. We'll be right back with Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter after we take this break for your news, sports, and weather. We'll be right back. I'm Larry McIntosh. Welcome back to the Louis Riel Day edition of Food and Friends. Our show normally airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9, and we hope you join us then. Thanks for tuning in today. My guest this afternoon is Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Center. Now, we were just talking off air about travel. Now, how did you get the travel bug to get in the industry to start with?
Well, a friend of mine who's actually stayed a close friend through all of these years, in the 70s suggested we should hitchhike around Europe. I had a great job. I was radio and television director of the largest advertising agency in Winnipeg, and chose to quit, which everybody thought I was nuts because I was doing exceptionally well at that time, and we decided to go to Europe. So we had our tickets for Air Canada and hitchhiked to Halifax, as that's where we were going to. That's where we were going to fly out of.
Okay.
And apparently, we were supposed to phone Air Canada because we were from a different place and confirm. They gave away our seats.
Oh.
And we said we would sleep at the airport for the next 3 days, since that was the next time they were going to fly us out. They put us up in a hotel. We walked along the docks in Halifax and were able to get onto a Danish freighter only because it was going to dry dock. And the seamen were falling off, so to speak. They were getting out of their jobs. So we got on, we cashed in our ticket, we had a final lobster, thank you Air Canada, and went to the ship, and I was then a union man.
Really?
Working on the Gilles Cord, going on its last voyage.
Wow.
And we were carrying empty kegs of Long John Silver. And at that time, Carlsberg beer was 10 cents. And we sure enjoyed that until most of the guys decided to drain the empty kegs, got totally drunk, and the captain cut off the beer for 3 days. But it was a great experience, and still one of my prized possessions is the framed document I have that says I was a motorman.
Have you ever figured out how many countries you visited?
I have been to about 65 countries, but I some of them I include them, but I never really spent time there. If you go on a cruise and you spend a day or two, I don't really consider that. But I've been about 50 countries that I have spent some significant amount of time in. So I've been very fortunate.
If you ever come over to Shelley and I's apartment, we have on our wall in my office in our apartment a map of the world, and we've put pins wherever we've traveled together. And what it says to me is, in North America, we've covered a lot of cities because of our business and visiting customers, etc. But there's a big world out there that we have not seen. As far as 2/3 of the map, we haven't done anything of.
Well, I really underscore the following. I say I've been to 65 countries, 50 that I've been to, but I've been nowhere. When I start looking at where I haven't been to Egypt. I haven't been to South Africa. I've been to many places. I haven't been to India. So I have been a lot of places, but I sure have got a lot left in this bucket list.
So what would your bucket list be for countries?
Well, I do want to go to India.
Yeah.
There's no question. For me, that is serious. I'd like to go to the Galapagos. I haven't been there. A lot of my friends have gone there. I actually have some interest. I've been through South America, but I have some interest in going lower and lower and taking some of like the National Geographic ship that goes right through to the icebergs and everything else. So I'm now looking to do some things that are a little different, and so those are all things that I would still very much like to do.
How many trips in a year would you take?
I likely don't take any more than 2 what I call real trips. Because of business and everything, I get to travel and I get to add on. The minute I go place, I'm always adding on and going elsewhere. I might take 3. I take usually one long trip.
Okay.
You know, this year is going to be a river cruise. I've only river cruised once, so we're going to take a river cruise, but it's a great one going from Paris to Prague. So we go from Paris, spend a few days in Paris, then motor coach to Luxembourg, and then carry on with the river cruise, and then motor coach to Prague and spend time. Now, I've been to Europe a lot, but I'm doing this one with a group of people who've traveled with us, and we always have a lot of laughs, and there's different people come and go. So this is more of an enjoyable one. But I definitely have not been to Vietnam. I've been to Thailand. I've been to Taiwan. I've been to China. I've not been to Vietnam or Cambodia. I will be going to Cambodia and Vietnam in the next 2 years. Definitely.
So you've got plans.
Oh, absolutely.
So out of all the places you've traveled, is there one that really is your favorite?
I have a lot of favorites for different reasons. They've impacted me in different ways. I would say one of the places that had a huge impact on me was Machu Picchu in Peru. You know, being on top of that mountain and looking at the civilization that was, and looking all around you and seeing nothing but air, is a profound experience. And I can tell you, get emotional when I talk about it.
Wow.
I sat at the edge of that hillside and I wept. It is so overpowering. And another friend of mine who was just there about a year and a half ago came back and said it was the most spiritual experience he and his wife had. There's something about being up there. Interestingly, it was Peru also the first and only time I bribed a cop.
Oh.
And that was a different experience.
Now you got to tell a little more about that story.
Well,
I mean, how did that come up?
We had, after we got back to Lima, we'd rented a car. And we'd gone through this check stop, and as we were going through, we were pulled over, and he asked, you know, "Butta documentas," and I gave him stuff, and he said, "Butta international driver's license." Now I knew I didn't need an international driver's license. I checked it ahead of time. So he was going back and forth, and this was getting unpleasant. And the clue for me was my friend said, "I'll see if someone speaks English." So we got out of the car because we're stopped and the cars are slow. And a fellow came out and was going to help us translate. And the officer said, no English. He turned around and walked away. So I thought, I'm either about to end up in jail or whatever. So I took the equivalent of a $5 bill and said, "Quantus costus international driver's license?" He said, "Dubla." I doubled up. And I guess that was my international driver's license.
And you didn't go to jail.
And I didn't go to jail.
We'll be right back with Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Super Center after this break. I'm Larry McIntosh. Welcome back to the Louis Riel Day edition of Food and Friends. Our show normally airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9, and we hope you'll join us then. Thank you for tuning in today. My guest this afternoon is Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Center. Ron, you have a show. What's the name of your show?
Journeys Travel Show.
On noon?
Sundays? At noon, yeah.
Every Sundays?
I was on yesterday, and next Sunday again, and in a couple of weeks I'll be broadcasting live from Las Vegas, as I tend to do when I go. I'm going to the big luggage show in Las Vegas in early March, and when I do travel, I make sure that I add the tourist element to it and spend as much time as I can. I check out a lot of things. I've been to Las Vegas a lot of times, but I'm always looking for something a little different. I try to interview different people, so I'll be going live from there for a couple of shows.
Oh, great.
And whenever I go on a trip, I try to either do a lot of interviews or preferably do a live show, because I found the live shows, the on-location shows, are very popular, and I get amazing feedback from them.
Yeah, this is a lot of extra work for you too. I mean, you're not only going to a show, you're traveling, and you're doing a radio show. That's a lot on you.
You know, it is, but the writing part of it for the column, I've been a writer all my life. That was what I started out with in the advertising business, and I've always written. And the broadcasting, again, for the back. But, as you know, you prepare a show. It does take some time. But it's a little bit of a labor of love. I don't mind it. I actually find it most enjoyable most of the time. The only time I find it difficult is when I'm trying to think of something fresh.
Right.
And that's the struggle. But honestly, I meet so many great people when I go interviewing people, as you do. You know, you're doing the show and you're always talking to different people and you find out about them. I love it. I'm, as you could likely tell, I'm an outgoing person. And when I meet people, it energizes me. So doing the show, yes, it is work, but it's the kind of work that really is not work.
So where is the place in the world that you have been that you wouldn't want to go back to? Was this maybe you feared it or wasn't pleasant? Is there any place that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's a place I was in South Africa. I was in West Africa, in Senegal. And I always find it very interesting because I went there initially for a conference, and the conference hall was marble. Everything was marble. It was amazing when you went into the meetings. You know, you thought you were in the United Nations with the appropriate buttons and translations. And then when you went outside the hall and not far down the road, the poverty was so extreme. Tourism is about going to places that are impoverished because that's the reason tourist plants are built, because it's fairly economical and people want to go to places. So there's poverty if you go to India, there's poverty if you go to Mexico. It's just the extreme of the poverty was very difficult to take. And you really recognize the haves and have-nots of this world. And you don't want to run from it, but at the same time, when you see that, you realize that I wish every tourist could, in effect, go and build it, because that, tourism builds friendships, it builds economies, it builds understanding. In the early stages, that doesn't happen easily. And that also one of my travel experiences occurred there when I was going through, and I tell people this frequently. I was going through customs there, and they asked me what I had in that little container, and I said, it's just the drugs I take. That was not a particularly good response. I think
The phrasing,
medications might be a little bit better. And I think had I not been on an official trip, I think I would still be there behind bars. But it's difficult to go to a country like that. You want to see it improve. Interestingly, our medical physician is Dr. Pierre Pleurin, and I think he's currently in Haiti. Haiti has just opened 3 new hotels, and they're sending people there as all-inclusive resorts. Now, that's going to be a slow build. So the business that I am in eliminates poverty, but it eliminates it slowly.
Right.
So when you see these countries, you do want to go, you do want to experience it, but you also take on a certain sadness, a certain empathy that you see. And I definitely had that when I went to Senegal. It was not easy.
When Shelley and I went to India, and we had some meetings in India years ago, and that was, we stayed at a 7-star resort or a 7-star hotel, but go outside the hotel and you see the poverty there. It's hard to take. People are friendly. There's certainly people that are billionaires there and people that have nothing. You come back and you appreciate what we have.
You know, I can't tell you enough how I empathize with that statement. I've been fortunate to travel all over the place, a lot of places to still see. But I will say over and over again, I've traveled the breadth of this country. I've yet to go to Nunavut. I haven't been there, and I've yet to go to the Rock. And I hope I do that soon. But as much as I've traveled, there is no country that is better than ours. We may not have the long history, but we do have history. We have beauty. We have an amazing population, great people. And I'll tell people all the time, go to every country, because it's a discovery that's great, but see this country. It's wonderful.
And you're absolutely right. And I've been fortunate enough to live across Canada and travel much of Canada, and I haven't been to Nunavut either. I've been to Newfoundland for sure. And it's a beautiful country, and you really, and we've been to the Rockies, you see it often, but people that have never seen that just are amazed at it, right? I mean, we have a lot to offer in this country, you're right.
It's an amazing country. I love it.
And do you think there'll be more people traveling domestically this year with the gas prices being a little lower?
That is one of the projections, that gas prices will be lower. We don't know if airline tickets are going to come down. They're not exactly coming down fast. There's a belief that the U.S. dollar is offsetting that in terms of prices of fuel. But I do believe there will be both an east and west migration of sorts as people go to experience what they have to offer. I was there 3 weeks ago in Vancouver. I mean, what an amazing city if you've never been there before. We just have a wonderful country, and it's worth visiting.
We'll be right back with Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter after this break. Welcome back to Food and Friends. Please join me next Saturday morning at 8 when my guest will be Carla DeLuca from DeLuca's. Carla will tell us about DeLuca's great food, wine, cooking classes, in-store bakery. I'm getting a little hungry talking about that. My guest today has been Ron Pradinuk from Journeys Travel and Leisure Supercenter. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been great, and I hope people enjoy this very special day because it is an important historical day in Manitoba, and it's worth finding the history that exists right here as well. It's a travel at home as well.
You're absolutely right. And it's been neat getting to know the other side of you. You're on the other side of the mic, as I said earlier, and it's good to get to know you. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thanks to Nicole Bonnycamp, our show's producer, and Riley Rivard, our camera guy. Take care, everybody, and please don't forget to eat your veggies.